In effect, the politics of hope. I give you Jeremy Corbyn.
Apologies that we couldn't hold the meeting a couple of weeks ago. It was a logistical problem brought about by numbers and the benign intervention, I'm sure, of the Cambridgeshire Police and the regulations of the local authority concerning the administration of Parker's Peace. So we couldn't hold that event that Sunday over that period. I'm really sorry about that, but it did pour with rain that night anyway, so you've all got soaking wet, and it's a great evening today, and we're here in this beautiful church, so somebody just say thank you very much to this church. Just say a big thank you to all the volunteers that have helped so much to put on this event tonight and all the other events that we're doing, because we've got an amazing team of volunteers in our campaign, and as of last week we did a count up and there's now 15,000 people across the UK. Is that possible? Does that work? Hello, does that work? No. Can you hear me? Yeah. Oh, good. Okay.
Can you go in the pulpit?
I'm happy. Can you go in the pulpit? Where that pulpit? The only thing I lost is my speech notes, but the problem with my speech notes is that I write things out. I can't read my own writing, but I hope it commits to memory when I do it. Can you all hear now? Is that okay? That's better. I can see everyone. So, this campaign has a number of principles surrounding it, and they are quite important ones. First of all, you may have noticed, those of you that read some newspapers when in a newsagent or over somebody's shoulder on a bus or something like that, some very unkind things have been said about us, about our campaign, about me, and many other people. We have taken a view, and a view I've taken all of my life, that whatever personal abuse is thrown around, I don't reply, I don't make any personal abuse, I don't get involved in that kind of politics, because that kind of politics is puerile, lowers the whole tone of everything. I'm much more interested in the political issues that are facing everyone in this country, facing the Labour Party, and how we go about changing that rather than indulging in that kind of ridiculous. It's a campaign about how we improve and enhance our democracy, both within our society and within the Labour Party and amongst Labour supporters, because I am fed up with the way in which party structures were destroyed in the mid-1990s, the way in which policy making became the gift of the leader or the leader's office and a few chosen people around the leader, and was handed down through the party structures and somehow were expected to be carried out onto the doorsteps by lots of loyal Labour Party workers. That is not the way any democratic party in a democratic society should operate and should do business. And so one very strong demand we make is that whatever the result of this election on September the 12th next Saturday, we're determined to change the whole way in which debate and structure and policy structures take place in the Labour Party, so it becomes fundamentally bottom up rather than top down. ambition and the ideas are there in every one of us. We've all got knowledge, we've all got ideas, we've all got ambitions. We all think of things that could be done better and could be done differently. So we need that space, that platform, that opportunity that people can put those views forward. I'm very determined that that should be the case. We also have to face some unpleasant realities and truths. We lost the election in 2010 and we lost the election in 2015. We went through a banking crisis, which Richard Murphy has explained, in the late period, 2008, 9, 10. That banking crisis was brought about by deregulation, brought about by bankers' greed, brought about by tax havens and tax avoidance and tax evasion, brought about by an entirely and unforgivably relaxed attitude towards the levels of inequality within our society. That banking crisis was not caused by those that clean our streets, that care for us in our hospitals, look after people in care homes, work in call centres, or any other ordinary or low-paid job. It was brought about by unbelievable levels of greed, unbelievable levels of mismanagement, and as a result the government had to buy up bank shares and also put £385 billion worth of quantitative easing into the banking system. So far so good, they had to do that, that was the right thing to do. But, and the big but is this, why were those shares placed in a holding company which can then be sold off, and Osborne is now doing that at a loss? They're not his to sell, they're ours to keep. And why do we then say, or did we then say, that the only solution to this is to set an arbitrary date to pay down the debt, an arbitrary date to move into budget surplus, and in the meantime cut almost every single area of public expenditure which affects the poorest and most vulnerable the hardest, has created the greatest levels of inequality, greatest levels of poverty for a very long time in our society, and the greatest levels of utter destitution for some people within our society. It was an uncaring approach, it was a wrong approach. Surely we have to recognise that austerity is not an economic imperative. Austerity is a political agenda which is accompanied by the idea of rolling back the state, rolling back the public services, and creating a much more individualised society rather than a collective society. And with that, of course, you get greater levels of inequality, greater levels of poverty, and absurd levels of wealth for a small minority in our society. Is that something we should really be even countenancing in the Labour Party or the Labour movement, or should we be offering something very, very different? The truth has to be faced. It has to be faced that in the 2010 election, we were, to quote one of our front bench spokespersons at the time, offering cuts that even Margaret Thatcher didn't dare to dream about. In the 2015 election, it was good stuff in the manifesto, no question about that, but the problem with it was to be accompanied by still more cuts in central government expenditure, still more reductions in various ministries, still more job losses, still more people moving out of fairly reliable public sector employment into unreliable zero-hours employment in the private sector. We shouldn't even be in that place or on that agenda. We should be arguing for and doing something very different. And so there's two fundamental themes to our campaign of how we go forward from here. The first is economic. We've put forward a number of policy papers, all of which are consultations, and in particular the one on economics, which Richard was talking about just now, is about investing in a productive economy, is about setting up a national investment bank that would be funded by a combination in a flatline economy of quantitative easing and other times by sale of bonds, but it would be about investing in infrastructure needs across the whole of the country, investing in education, investing in housing, and investing in high-tech engineering jobs in a planned way so we had an expanding rather than contracting manufacturing sector in this country. The skill levels that are there and underutilised in many parts of the country are quite absurd and quite wrong. We've become grossly imbalanced with 80% of people working in the service sector. Other European countries don't do that, they do things very differently. This is condemned by some journalists as being absurd and left-wing, etc., etc., etc. If I was making this contribution in Germany, people would say that's absolutely sensible, normal thing to do. Most countries that want to maintain a balanced economy do that kind of thing. And when we were condemned for originally producing this document, we then received a great deal of support from many other people, economists, including Nobel Prize-winning economists, for challenging the whole notions of austerity and putting forward the idea of a much more balanced, fairer economy within our society. I think we have changed the political debate, the political agenda, by that document that was put forward. That of itself is important, but it's also something about how you organise society. Is government's function a book-balancing exercise, or is government's function to ensure that the entire society is able to live, survive? People do get housing, do get jobs, do get schools, do get hospitals, do get benefits when they need them. Surely that should not be up for grabs. That should be fundamental to how we approach things. But it's also a question of the role of the state. We went down the road of private finance initiative during the last Labour government. I remember arguing about this when the very idea was dreamt up in the mid-1990s, before Labour came into office, and I was told by a lot of people in the Labour Party, shut up, don't raise those difficult questions because it might damage our chances of winning the election. I said, look, hang on a minute, this is absurd. What you're proposing to do is hand over whole swathes of the public services to the private sector in order to improve them, and we pay through the nose for it for a very long time. It is an absurd way of investing. Suppose you built a hospital for £1 million and you paid 6 million quid 10 years later not to own the same hospital. Doesn't seem to me to be very sensible or very good economics. Far better that you invest in it as a public service through the normal methods of public financing, and you have the hospital, yours for all time, ours for all time, not absurdly expensive and not with a priority payment to a PFI hedge fund to be the first call on any hospital or school budget. Turn it round, do it the other way, do it as a public service. How we deal with the issues of poverty, inequality and justice within our society. When this Tory government came in 2010, their first thing to do was the emergency budget. Any water about it? I'll give us quick. You see why he's the best MP in Norfolk. Thank you, Clive. How we deal with the issues of welfare. The first thing that government did was to take a huge bite out of the welfare budget. They're now doing so again with the welfare reform bill. That welfare reform bill is a brutal piece of legislation if ever I saw one. It imposes an even lower benefit cap of 23,000 in London, 20,000 outside London on the total benefit available to any one family. It sounds a lot of money until you look at the levels of private rent in this city, in Cambridge, most parts of London, look at Oxford, look at York, look at parts of Manchester, look at parts of Edinburgh and many other places, and you see an out-of-control private rented sector with private sector landlords charging absurdly high rents that are subsidised by DWP payments through housing benefit. Can't we instead turn it round? Regulate the private rented sector, control the levels of rents, and give people real security remaining in those places rather than 6 months short-hold tenancies with all the stress and tension that does to those people or children that are forced to move schools every 6 months. We can and should do all work benefits that actually subsidise low wages within our society also has to be addressed. And so I understand and have seen the calculations done by the TUC on a £10 per hour minimum wage, which is doable, affordable, correct and proper, and gives people on low wages at least a reasonable chance of being able to survive normally. And also, I want to get rid of the youth rate on the national minimum wage. It seems to be grossly unfair and young people. Attitude on the welfare state and welfare systems. There are a people that have been approved as fit for work on the availability for work test, particularly those with disabilities or those with mental health conditions, approved as fit for work when they patently are not. They then go through the trauma of losing benefits, the trauma of a long drawn out appeal in which they may or may not be successful, and if they are successful then they go back onto those benefits and are able to continue their lives. If they're not, then they either lose benefits altogether because they're unable to take up work which they've been told they're fit for. The DWP was forced to reveal the figures on the number of people that have died and taken their own lives as a result of this process. What kind of brutality is it that we have a welfare system that is so cruel and so brutal on some of the most vulnerable and needy people in our society, they end up committing suicide out of fear of what is going to happen to them? It is simply wrong. We, as a Labour Party, must rediscover our strength, our moral commitment, our determination to say we are proud to defend the idea of a society that will prevent anyone falling into destitution. We're proud to be a society that will help those people that at the moment are reliant on food banks or sleeping in the streets. Instead, we are prepared to tax what is necessary, to fund what is necessary to help people in a bad situation. Obviously help them to get to work if they're able to get to work, but be proud of the principle of a society that stops anyone from falling into destitution. So no more remarks about benefit scroungers, no more benefit street on our televisions, no more this abuse of those people. Something that we need to be strong and determined about. And though I'm told by some people, this is absolutely impossible stuff, because that will mean that the better off, the middle classes, those that are slightly even better off than the better off of the better off middle classes, will be too better off to even think about other people. I say this to them. One day we're all going to be old. One day we all might need social care. One day we're going to have accidents. One day we might become disabled. One day we might need all kinds of help. If there's no system there for the people now, there'll be no system there for you when that comes about to you. Do you want to live in a civilized society where we actually do care for all, or do you want to live in a society where we, as an article of national faith, pass by on the other side while fellow citizens are doing so very badly and in such a bad place? I think when you appeal to people on the basis of moral civilization, you do actually get support for it, and people do understand the kind of world that they want to live in. Attitudes can be changed. 3 weeks ago, all of our papers were condemning refugees and asylum seekers. Our Prime Minister was talking about swarms coming in from Calais and those kind of things. Micheline explained earlier about what's going on in Calais, the horrors of that situation. But because of popular feeling, popular understanding, that those people fleeing from the war in Syria, those people fleeing from Eritrea or many other places, trying to get to a place of safety, are human beings, just like you, just like me, who are doing their best to survive in an appallingly difficult situation. Can we not approach this on the basis of humanity, justice and human needs, rather than condemnation of those people just trying to survive? We're a wealthy country, we can afford and should do a great deal more about it. If Germany is capable of taking in the number of refugees it has taken in, then this country must take in its share as well. But we must also play a part in trying to bring about a process that ends the source of the war, that ends the funding and arms supplies to ISIL and others, so we do bring about a political settlement and a political solution to the conflict in the whole region. But you can't achieve that if at the same time you condemn the victims of war and carry on selling arms to those that supply them, to those Thank you. The other points I want to make are this, about how we develop our society and develop particularly areas of education. You couldn't not say that in Cambridge, really, could you? And this is the university of all universities, isn't it? Yeah. What a wonderful, beautiful city it is. And I feel often very proud of young people that have graduated from all universities. Very proud of them for what they've achieved. And they ought to be quite justly proud of it themselves. But why as a society have we tended to turn education into a commodity rather than something we believe in as a necessity for all of us? Why are we allowing students to graduate with debts of 40, 50, 60,000 pounds? And now the danger of lifting the cap altogether, so the fees will become unattainable for a large number of people within our society. Can't we value education in the way that Scandinavia and other countries do? And instead of cutting corporation tax, raise corporation tax in order to pay the student fees so that my generation that had free university education does not have the temerity to take it away from subsequent generations. Address as well. Interestingly, in all these hustings and debates, and as I was saying earlier, by this Thursday it would have been 97 that I've been at since this campaign started. So I'm sure something else is going to get put in, so it'll probably reach well over 100 by the time we get to next Saturday morning. It's been a very interesting series of debates and questions at some of the hustings. Interestingly, preschool education or preschool facilities has come up quite a lot. One level you might say that's surprising, another level not. Think about how a child starts in life. If their parents have enough money to be able to buy them a childcare facility or preschool place or something like that until they start school, good. If they're very poor, they might get a free place, good. I want all children to be able to go to a preschool opportunity, I prefer to call it that, so they learn to play together, to grow up together, to socialise together, to understand each other together, because those crucial early years are so important in forming attitudes for the future, attitudes towards each other, to other people, to children with special difficulties, learning needs, all those kind of things. Can't we say that we as a society are prepared to spend the money to provide a place for every child to go to a preschool facility rather than just the very poor or those that can afford it? I think it's good for all of us if we're able to do that. Moving on to the I was formerly a councillor in Haringey before I became a Member of Parliament, and I valued the role of our authority as a local education authority, just as much as I value the role of my own local education authority in Islington, creating a family of schools. And I was very proud when a couple of years ago, council phoned me up and said, would I like to come to the Royal Albert Hall to watch the school's music concert? I said, yeah, I'd love to go there. So I went there, it was a huge affair, and it was some of it was quite funny actually, because it was partly sponsored by the NUT, the Schools Music Association, and Michael Gove was invited as Education Secretary to speak, and was forced to acknowledge the contribution of the NUT to the event, which was quite good, hearing him utter the words NUT, at which point a whole lot of children, not unconnected to the borough I came from, started booing him. In education at that time. And my borough had put on a concert as part of a whole evening of concerts in which they had the great ambition of a 100-piece orchestra and a 200-voice choir. Very, very ambitious. Those kids came from every school across the borough, and they did brilliantly. It was great, and we were all very proud of them. And I was just thinking, how did that come about? Because we had a family of schools, a family of education, music teachers and music advisors who were determined to achieve it. You couldn't have done that if our borough had consisted of 10 free schools and 20 academies all in competition with each other. You only achieve those things if you work together. So I want to see the academies and free schools brought back within the orbit of the local education. of the educational maintenance allowance is absolutely crucial. So many young people from working class families getting that EMA meant they were able to stay on at school, meant they were able to go to college, meant they were able to go into courses or go to university or whatever they wanted to do. That opportunity is now taken away. I don't see it as a waste of public money. I saw an investment in the good of all of us to ensure that every young person can gain their potential and go through to study to whatever they want to do, vocational or other qualifications. I would also want to see much tighter regulation of the apprenticeship system, because far too many apprenticeships are, in my view, not sufficiently well regulated and often become a source of cheap labour for some employers. I'm in favour of apprenticeships, but regulate them properly and make sure there's good. Losing out on very badly is adult education. The Labour Party and the Labour movement have always been very proud of the idea, both for our own education and others, that we should have the ability to go back to college if you want to learn something, study something else. Not necessarily for an in-work qualification, but education for itself, for the value of learning, because we all benefit from each other's learning, knowledge and education. So can't we stop them destroying the adult education service, finance it properly, so that we do as a society, instead of closing libraries and closing facilities, say, hang on, these things are good for the individual, but good for society as a whole. The last area I just want to mention is the question of environment and environmental degradation around the world and how we deal with these issues. Because climate change is clearly happening, there are millions of people around the world that are environmental refugees. The damage to our own biodiversity is quite serious by some agricultural systems, some planning procedures and other things. And so we've got some pretty tough decisions to make. Tough decisions to make on energy production, how we promote more sustainable, renewable energy rather than fossil fuel energy generation. I'm not personally a great fan of nuclear power and don't want to see new nuclear power stations. I also am very concerned about the levels of pollution, not just in this country but around the world, and the lack of global regulation in so many areas. It's all very well Europe saying we have tough environmental protection regulations. If we don't have global regulation on environmental emissions, pollution, air pollution and water pollution, we then allow, in effect, the most vulnerable people in cities in India and China to die from asphyxiation from air pollution, making goods that are then imported very cheaply to Western European and North American markets. There's got to be a global approach to a global problem and a global solution to that problem. We need to push very, very hard on all of that. To protect our own biodiversity in our own way, in our own society, and look at the farming methods that go with it. These things are not options or add-ons. These are absolutely crucial for the kind of world we're going to leave behind for the next generation and the generation after that. And so that will mean challenging some free market economics. It will mean challenging things like the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. It will mean but this, at one level, this process we're going through is about an election for one position in the Labour Party. But at another level, it's something else. Every one of you in this church tonight, I'm sure, has been on a demonstration at some point in your life, yeah? Put your hands up, those who have never been on a demonstration. Thank you. Gentlemen here. Okay. Talk to you later. But most people go on demonstrations against something. We could have been against things, actually. We go on lots of things against things, demanding something stop, something not happen. But this is something slightly different, because essentially it's a movement about optimism. It's a movement about ideas. It's a movement about hope. It's not just here. It's happening across Europe. It's happening in the USA with Bernie Sanders' campaign. is happening in a lot of places. We are saying that the next generation doesn't have to be poorer than this generation. The generation that comes after that doesn't have to be poorer than that one. Do we as a society go forward by saying we will blame every arriving minority for our problems, we'll blame every minority for the shortage of housing or the difficulties in the health service or anything else, or will we instead recognise we achieve things together? We achieve things by the strength of our determination to ensure that everyone is housed, everyone has a health service, everyone has a school, and young people do have real opportunities and jobs. And it means that the Labour Party has got to recognise that in losing 2 elections, I think we lost because we were not clear enough about what we were actually offering to people. What's impressive about the number of older people that are coming back into the Labour Party or trade union activity because they see some possibility and some hope, and a number of young people that are attracted to this because it isn't just the usual sort of yard sucks knockabout politics, which is essentially about who's going to manage something next month, rather than about the fundamental ideas that you bring to the way we run and the way we run society. Earlier today we were in Burston, commemorating the Higlins and what they stood up for in the strike school that was established and ran right up until the Second World War. In July, I was at the Durham Miners' Gala, which was commemorating the incredible bravery and hardship of the miners and all that they put into defending their jobs, defending their class, defending their unions, and fighting for real social justice. We were at Toll Brothers in commemoration of the Toll Brother martyrs and what they gave up. We have to recognise that the achievements in our society, the way we got the vote, the way women got the vote, the way we got the National Health Service, the way we got the Human Rights Act, the Equalities Act, Disability Discrimination Act, Race Relations Act, all those things didn't come by accident and didn't come by a couple of genii sitting around a table in the members' tea room in the House of Commons. They came from the joy, hope, imagination and aspiration of ordinary people coming together. We learned from the hardships that our forefathers and foremothers went through in order to try and bring about some decency and justice in our society. Let's not give up on our principles, give up on our history, give up on the principles that brought this movement into existence, but say they're as strong and relevant today as they've ever been, and they're as necessary and relevant today as ever before in a world of unbelievably powerful global corporations and frankly rather weak democracies to try and control what they do. There's a huge job of work to be done, and a huge job of work to be done in education and activation within our society. I like to think that this summer of activism has been a very important staging point and start of that particular process, and it's very exciting. If you stay at home and shout at the television, you'll probably make your voice as bad and weak as mine. You'll probably end up going hoarse, and if you start throwing things at the television, you'll probably break it. It costs you a bit of money to replace it. And unfortunately, at the end of that, absolutely nothing would have changed. But if you're out there doing things together, working together, having imagination together, you don't always win. No, you don't always win, but you excite people in the process, and you do change things. You do change society. You do achieve apparently unachievable. And so it's not about dreaming, it's about ensuring that the poorest and most vulnerable in our society are not cast aside by the callousness of a market-orientated Tory government. And there's a Labour Party and a Labour movement standing there with them to support them and work with them, but above all, to bring about the kind of just, decent, democratic society that we value and really want all to live in. That is what this campaign is about. And whatever the result next Saturday, we stay together, we work together, we campaign together. We're on the road. We're on the march together to that decent, just world that we all want to live in. Thank you very much.